Hi there, and welcome to Shapers, Makers, Builders, and Breakers. I'm your host today, Benjamin Shaw. Shapers is the podcast show that brings you African leadership stories in all spheres of society, where we interview exceptional individuals telling us their story.
This podcast is brought to you by Exeo Capital. Exeo Capital is a leading alternative private equity fund manager that through its 15-year history have focused on investing in African businesses with purpose and impact. Exeo covers the whole of the African continent with investment teams based in Cape Town, South Africa and Nairobi, Kenya, currently managing investments in 9 African countries. The core investment thesis revolves around partnering with exceptional businesses and their teams that have the ability to impact Africa in the decades to come. Exeo does this through providing growth capital to these businesses, but more than that, leveraging a partnership ethos with the companies they invest in. For more information, please have a look at their website, www.exeocapital.com. That is www.exeocapital.com.
Since the start of the Shapers podcast, the approach to interviews has remained the same. Engage in peer-to-peer conversations by asking the questions that we would most like the answers to. Today's show is an incredible conversation with Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu. Like in many of our episodes, this was a conversation full of storytelling, best practice, lessons in leadership, and inspiration for us all.
We hope that you will enjoy today's conversation as much as we enjoyed recording it. Without any further delay, let's dive into our next episode of Shapers, Makers, Builders, and Breakers.
Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu has blazed the trail of upliftment in South Africa over several decades. He's a CA MBA with numerous honorary doctorates and has spent time as economic advisor to the president. Most recognizably, it was the Prof that was entrusted as chairman of KPMG's turnaround on the back of various state capture reports. He has, amongst many other roles, served 2 terms as president of SAICA, and his biography was released almost exactly 10 years ago. It's a real honor to have you on the show today, Prof.
Well, thank you for having me.
If you don't mind, let's start way back before your career. You were born in Cala, Eastern Cape. You became a political prisoner on Robben Island by age, I think, 19.
Yes.
Tell us about those early years. What formed you, your family upbringing? What was your childhood like?
Well, my parents had a small small farm, I would say. They were measured in morgens. You'll work it out what a morgen is.
Okay.
There were about 4 morgens. That's how they used to describe the size of the land.
Sure.
So I grew up really looking after my father's cattle and helping, especially my mother, in growing the vegetables. That's what I used to do before going to school. I would go to the vegetable garden and work my plot in terms of whatever vegetables we're going to plant. And I grew that way. And of course, looking after the cattle, doing the milking, and of the cows, and going to school as well.
Sure.
I'll do my chores in the morning, and then by 8:30, be on my way to school. Yes. It was just the life for every young boy in the countryside and the villages. That's how we grew up. But the ideas about why we're being sent to school, why my parents were keen that I get education, I had no idea at the time. But it was much later that I became much more aware of the importance of education in one's life and so on.
And how big was the family and the village around you? What was the school like?
No, it was a small rural school. At the time, most of the schools were run in church buildings, attending classes in a Methodist church building. On Sundays, it will be converted into a church hall. During the week, it was used. So it was a very small school. I doubt that we're more than 100 pupils at the school at the time. And then that's where I did my early stages of primary school. I don't know what they say these days, but those days you had to do sub A, sub B, and then grade 1, 2, and 3. Those are the classes that I did at that school.
Sure. And the family at the time, did you have siblings with you? Were they also working?
Yes, I'm the firstborn of my parents, so I had to do all the work, and my siblings were much younger at the time. But my brother, who comes just after me, of course, he used to join me. We used to work together on all the things. There were 4 of us. At my parents, 5 actually. Yeah. So at the time, but when I was growing up, those early days, there were 2 of us, and then the third one came when I was already 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
And I left about that time to go and stay with my grandparents, far away from my parents' home at Cala.
You mentioned school, and you mentioned you've only reflected now on why education was important. What were your ambitions at the time? Did you think beyond the farm? What was moving, for example, from Cala like?
No. I had no ambitions about careers, because the only careers that I was exposed to was working on the land, was working on the farm. I couldn't think beyond that. But what really used to encourage and motivate me was just the wanting to do better than my classmates and be position 1 or in the first 3 or so.
Wow.
Because my mother used to like that, and I would get prizes for doing it. So everything was just about making sure that I get approval of the parents and I get praise for it.
That's a really interesting insight. So competitive, but looking to please your parents for it.
Yes.
Now, to shift gears a little bit, the National Party came into power 1948. They formalized apartheid. They also, by so doing, mobilized anti-apartheid organizations sort of through the 50s. How was it that you moved from a boy on a farm in Cala all the way through to Robben Island, 10, 15 years later?
Of course, doing the primary school, you are not developed enough to take an interest in politics and so on. So really thinking about myself, what it really means to be Wiseman Nkuhlu, Wiseman Nkuhlu, I only became really conscious of that after I had passed standard 6, finished primary school. When I was doing my junior certificate, which I think is equivalent to standard 7 and grade 7 and 8 or so currently. It was during those years that I started taking an interest reading history, for instance. You would read history and get to understand the history of South Africa and how the African people used to really be self-reliant, working on their lands and so on, and what happened then when they met the white people on the border, first the Afrikaners and then later the British. You get to understand those things. And also reading the Bible, because the schools those days, question of Christianity was also part of the curriculum. So a combination of that, reading the Bible and also reading the history, starts triggering some introspection, some ideas about who you are and why you live the way you live when other people live differently. It was a combination of the Christian teaching and history that just raised my consciousness about my own position. So that was the days that I was at secondary school, which was in Cala. As I say, it's equivalent possible of grade 6 to 7, 8. Mm-hmm. And then when I completed that, I went to Lovedale High School, which was a high school, where now I was doing matric. And this awareness of the position of my people in history, and also questioning of my own role in life, what I'm going to be, that awareness increased, developed during that time when I was at Lovedale, especially after completing junior certificate. You do the equivalent of grade 11 now, that is the year before you do your matric. You get very curious. You think that you know everything. You want to know everything, and you want to understand why your people have no land, why they have no votes, and then if this is unfair, and you have to do something about it. That's when that. Then in terms of your own development, you're about 17 years or so. You think that you've got a lot of energy, power, curiosity. And it was during those days that really I started this awareness led me now to also attend conversations or meetings outside the classroom that were being conducted around Lovedale by Fort students from the University of Fort Hare. They used to visit us at Lovedale to talk about African history, to talk about the liberation struggle. That's when I got introduced to the African National Congress, to the PAC, and also All African Convention during those days. And of course, I as a youngster, I was very curious to learn. So I started attending these meetings that were outside on Sundays to get to understand about the position of the African people, why they don't have the rights to vote, and why we are not represented in parliament, and just a lot of injustices, because at that time, wherever you go, there will be an entrance for blacks, entrance for white people, and better things were only available to white people, not to black people. So at that time, you became very conscious. Whether you go to a bank, there's a small, I would say an office where you go and get attended by the bank. And post office, the same thing. You have got your own side, which is very small and usually very much badly equipped. Those things start irritating you because now you have got this consciousness. So it was during that time then I started attending those meetings. Then it just happened that some of my classmates were caught in an uprising in King Williamstown.
And sorry, just before you tell me about that, you mentioned the Fort Hare students coming down. Those events weren't organized by the school, though. They were ANC or PAC run events. Is that true? Is that how it sort of progressed? And was that a once-off, or was that quite a sustained?
Lovedale High School is hardly 3 kilometers from Fort Hare.
Okay.
So over weekends, it was common for our own us as students to have brothers and sisters at Fort Hare to go to Fort Hare. It was also common for Fort Hare students to come to us.
Okay.
So then the senior students at Fort Hare were already members of the ANC, and they were keen to educate us. They would come after hours to do that.
Okay, so that was the connection to Fort Hare.
Yes.
And then you started to get involved in some of these groups.
Yes. I started attending those meetings over Sundays to get to know. That's when then I got to understand the politics, and the fact that as a young African male, there was no way I could accept the status quo. If there was an opportunity to join the liberation struggle, I felt that it was my duty to do that.
Sure.
So that's why I got involved in politics. But as I say, what really happened, what led me to go to Robben Island is that there was a strike at Lovedale, and some of the people that were members of my cell were caught, and one of them turned state witness. He gave our names, and then when we were all rounded up in our respective villages, were brought to Alice, and then a few of our former classmates became state witness and gave evidence against us to say that we're members of the PAC, were attending those meetings, and then were convicted. 1962, yeah.
62. Many listeners will have heard about Robben Island, and of course internationally.
Sorry, that was 1963. I'm making a mistake.
1963. Many listeners to the pod would have heard of Robben Island and particularly be aware of it through the lens of what Nelson Mandela went through and his writings and a lot of the exposure that it got through his ascension to presidency. What was Robben Island like for you, for the group that, as you say, were caught together?
Yes, we were young, a lot of energy, very confident, and we were prepared to take whatever was dished to us. So it was hard work. We, before going to Robben Island, we were sent to a prison in East London, Fort Glamorgan. At Fort Glamorgan, my group we were between 18 years old and 21. So we worked on the quarry. Sure. On the quarry, you use pick and shovel to work on the big stones after they have been blasted. They blast it, and then you go and collect those and load them on a cocoa pen, and you drive the cocoa pen to the crusher. So that's what we used to do the whole day. Oh. Yeah, and of course we took it in style because there was no way we could show our weaknesses. It was not going to help. So yeah, it's good when you are young and you are a group. You support each other, you motivate each other, and last thing you want to show is weakness in that. So
a sense of community, camaraderie.
Yeah. Those were difficult, as I say. Staying in a small cell, communally with a small hole as a toilet here, your toilet here in the presence of everybody and all that. But you just say, if this is the price, I'm strong enough to take this thing. I'm going to get out of this thing, and I'm going to take fighting. I'm going to continue fighting until we're free. Sure. So, going to Robben Island, it was a continuation of that. Even at Robben Island, I was in a cell with most of my colleagues from Lovedale and other guys that were with us at Fort Glamorgan. So supporting and strengthening each other, we did that very well. But working on the quarries was far onerous than possibly the time that Mandela got there. They had high profile, they could complain and be heard by the world. But for us, we're driven like slaves by hard, young African wardens. So there were no blacks when I arrived there among the wardens, they were all white. And they would drive us in the quarry. It was a lime quarry. We had to dig the lime and load it in wheelbarrows, and you have to push the wheelbarrow. And I don't know for what purpose, but we're doing that, every day. Wake up, go to the quarry before sunrise, actually. But you came back about 4. By sunset, you're already in your cell, long time. It was hard life, but as I say, and your hands would be sore and all that because of the driving the wheelbarrow and so on, and being chased around. It was hard, and that time we're not even allowed to study. We used to get encouragement, motivation just from each other, talking about the struggle, talking about the hope that we had that the African countries that were free at the time were going to come to South Africa to liberate us. And we're very confident that there's no way we'll finish our sentences there. We'll be liberated by forces from the rest of the continent.
Sure.
But of course it never happened. by the time we came out, all of us, we went different directions. But that was possibly more difficult time when you're on your own now. But
after being incarcerated,
Robben Island, the hardship of parading naked every evening in front of youngsters, with your older people in front of you, naked for rows and rows. Those things were very humiliating. You used to fill one with a lot of anger that took many years to get out of, because when we've had that experience of really being, humiliated that way, it stays with you. You dream about it for years afterwards, that you see yourself standing in front of young men, naked, with your father behind you and your grandfather possibly behind you, because we're different ages. All of you carrying your clothes in your hands, because they have to see that there's nothing you're hiding between your legs. And that was terrible. Yeah. But in the end, we survived all that.
Could you tell me how that forged your view of the world when you left? So you said that it was hard, then you would have lost your community to some degree. You would have lost the life that you were used to, even though it was hard. What happened when you came back? And you mentioned 3 words earlier: energy, power, curiosity. I imagine those 3 stuck with you even after the period
Yes. No. Getting out of there was always some kind of competitiveness and ambition in me, because as the firstborn and a person who was also used to be praised and rewarded by my parents when I was growing, when I do good, I had this thing of wanting to really prove myself. When I went off jail, of course, my age group were 2 years ahead of me. Some of them were finishing university, actually, because I'd lost 2 years, during the time that I was in prison. So the fact that I was behind my age group did bother me, because I just couldn't take that.
You felt you were behind.
That I'm behind. I just felt that I had to do something about it. But of course, I started clarifying my goals, thinking about my goals, where I want to be in a few years' time, during that time. I think that helped me a lot in terms of just giving me direction, because it was easy to break down. When you look at yourself, you look at your age group, you feel that you are 2 years behind, you are useless. You are not as gifted as them. Why are you? I mean, you have been jailed at 19 years. How do people look at you when you are young and you have been to jail? So all those things can break you, or if we are lucky to have strength of character to clarify your own goals, and you've got something possibly that serves as an anchor. The people that think very highly of you, your parents, that think they had these ambitions. Sending me to Lovedale was a great sacrifice to them. So the fact that they sent me to Lovedale made me feel that they've got great expectations of me. Then they feel that I've got potential to be something in life. So all those things worked on me. When coming off jail, then the big thing was that staying at home with my parents, there was the unpleasantness of being visited by the security branch often, and wanting to know what I was doing, or questioning them and all that. So because of that, I just felt that this was a burden that I brought to my parents, so I must do something about it. So I went to the mines. So I left home, I just went to the mines, just took a train and went to go to the mines. So when I got to the mines, then I did my matric. I studied through correspondence to finish my matric. By that time, there was an idea that I started developing in my mind when I was at Robben Island, but now it was still coming up. When I'm quiet, I would think about it. The idea was that I should really get myself qualified as an economist, so that I can go and work in Addis Ababa as chief economist for the Organization of African Unity. Organization of African Unity was formed during the time that we were in prison in 1963. So to us, the formation of the Organization of African Unity, African countries deciding to establish this Pan-African body in 1960 was a great symbol of success of Africa realizing its greatness again. So I wanted to be part of that and be a chief economist there. So when I was doing my matric, then through correspondence, I took economics, I took accounting and so on, because I had this thing. But I had no idea where it would lead.
Sure.
But that's how I managed to collect myself. I had this idea that was crystallizing in my mind about my ambition. I had this thing of my parents believing that there was potential in me, and the encouragement that they used to give me. Those things gave me discipline, I would say, in terms of saying there's a purpose. I must have a purpose in life. There's a purpose, and I'm capable of achieving much better than just being a clerk in a mine.
Sure.
So yeah, that was how then other things progress from there.
Wow, that's amazing. And I mean, it's so interesting. You've mentioned for the first time you've mentioned the word ambition, but it's almost been a shift in your mindset from curiosity, the energy, the power that you felt, then the lack of power, and then going into bettering yourself on others' behalf. That ambition, in inverted commas, that then translated into what you studied. First of all, with the idea of going for, to support a political cause. But what I've read, and in many of the books, the interviews you've given, you've noted that you're quite driven by a belief in excellence and your national duty, the pride that you have in Africa, in her people. You worked and studied then to become an accountant, the first South African black chartered accountant. Why chartered accountancy? What was the switch from economics to there? And obviously it's led to many things we'll get to. But maybe paint a picture of that landscape at the time, and why was it appealing to you?
No, when I was in Robben Island listening to the visions of a future Africa articulated by the Pan-African Congress and its leaders, what was clearer to me was the role of economics in creating a better future for Africa. I knew nothing about accounting, so at that time. So that's why it was what crystallized in my mind. If I'm going to play a role in the economic development of Africa, I had to be an economist. That's what. Great, yeah. So going to Forte after completing my matric through correspondence, then I had this thing. I said, this cannot be the end of the road. Let me take my chances and apply to Forte and see whether with my political background I'll be admitted. I got admitted. They allowed me to go to Forte. And then, of course, this thing again came up, this thing that the people that were my juniors at Lovedale are finishing their degrees. I'm 2-3 years behind them. And then possibly that inspired me, because I just couldn't take it that they are better than me in any way, because I'm very competitive, I'm very ambitious. So when I registered for the BCom degree, I was so greedy for knowledge that I found it difficult to choose. So I said, economics is important for what I want to be. Business management is important for what I want to be. I cannot not have that knowledge of business management. Accounting is important because I was beginning to understand now the role of accountants, in running big businesses. Statistics, again, in understanding trends, it's so important. So I decided those were going to be my majors. So the tradition at university was that I think you had the maximum number of majors that you could take, that is courses that you do from first year to third year, were 3 majors. But I couldn't choose, so I decided all 4 to take them. I ended up with those 4 majors. It was during my second year at fourth year then that I became much aware of the role of accounting in running big businesses. When I really we're dealing with balance sheets, income statement, I said, wow, unless one is able to understand accounting, you cannot really run a country or run a hospital or anything if you don't understand how. And is this field of knowledge that gives you a deeper understanding of how to allocate resources and how to check whether they are being used correctly. Is when you have got to know. I took a keen interest in this thing. Though by the second year, I became aware that there were no Africans chartered accountants. And that gradually now started competing with my interest in economics.
And probably appealed to your sense of competitiveness and ambition.
Yeah. Now I was faced with this thing. I couldn't decide whether I wanted to be an economist or an accountant. By the third year, that conflict was still there. I couldn't make it up my mind because I had passed both with good grades, accounting, economics, and business management. I said, no, I think what resolved the matter was very strange. At that time, when I'd finished, the head of accounting persuaded me to stay at Fort Hare to do some tutoring, because he still wanted to persuade me to go into articles in accounting.
Okay.
But my interest was to do honors course in economics. And then the head of Department of Economics decided that he wouldn't offer an honors course whole year for one student. So there was not going to be
didn't have the chance.
I was not going to have a chance to do an honors in economics. So the head of accounting said, I've always said you must come to my department. I'll get you a firm where you can do articles. So then that's how then this thing tilted towards accounting. Then at that time, because of that frustration, of not being allowed to do an honors course in economics, I went to do articles in accounting, and then the rest is history. From that point onwards, my focus was on qualifying as first African chartered accountant.
And you mentioned articles. For those who aren't aware of how the CA progression sort of works, you get honors in accounting, or you must complete, I think it's now 3 or 4 modules before you get to write an exam and do articles.
Yes, you go and work. At that time, you could only serve articles or receive your training from an accounting firm, auditing firm.
Okay.
So I had to find an auditing firm, but my head of department made contact with me. There was an African firm, Hoek and Vian, that the head office was in Pretoria, but they had an office in East London as well.
Okay.
So he managed to get me to be articled to the East London office of Hoek and Vian.
Sure.
So then I did my training in auditing and accounting for 3 years with them.
Sure.
Yeah.
And was it that you were the only non-white there?
Yeah.
And
It was like that, and strange things would happen when, of course, very difficult to make my children understand that. But the clients, my principal had to get the permission of the client,
sure,
whether I could be allowed to get to the premises. If I do, when there is tea time or lunch, I'll go and drink and be given drink in a mug, whatever coffee they give me, with the cleaners, because some of the business had no blacks in clerical jobs or managerial jobs. So here I come, I'm the only black person here, and my principal would go and dine with his counterpart, the chief executives, but I would go into the kitchen or some place, and
Sure.
so we tolerated strong enough because I was determined. Actually, those things, instead of wearing me down, they made me believe that despite all these frustrations, I'm going to surprise everybody here. I'm going to qualify as a chartered accountant. They think that they're doing me a favor by giving me this training, because they know for a fact they're going to prove again that Africans cannot qualify as chartered accountants. For them, this was an experiment. They're going to get the result that they want, that Africans are incapable of doing that, even when they're given opportunities. But I said, it's not going to happen with me. I'm going to really pass. That resolve to actually be an exception was deeply, deeply burning inside me. And actually that pushed me all the way.
Sure, it's amazing. And often you hear these stories of adversity sort of forging people through fire, as it were. But I mean, that was such a sustained drag for so many years that you had to face.
No, of course. There were times when I would be on the verge of giving up, but something would happen and I would be able to get re-inspired again. I mean, an example, for instance, during the time that I was doing articles, I had to complete a number of courses through correspondence, through UNISA. And during that time, one of the courses was data processing, which is computer science these days. And I'd never seen a computer, and even during my articles, I had no exposure to computers.
Wow.
So I had to do this computer data processing through UNISA. So it became clear after registering for the course the second time. First time I registered for it, I couldn't do the first assignment because I just couldn't comprehend what was in the books, could understand. So I gave up the first year. I registered for the course second year, same thing happened. I think I tried the first assignments, but in the middle of the year I gave up. So I was almost giving up that I will ever qualify as a chartered accountant. But sometimes these things happen, we don't have a logic of explaining them. But whilst I was in that situation, on the verge of giving up, I get an invitation from the head of department at Fort Hare to attend a lecture that was going to be given by Professor Kritzinger, who was the head of the Department of Accounting at the University of Cape Town. It was going to be a visiting professor to Fort Hare.
Right.
They wanted me to come and attend his lecture. Which thing I agreed. I went there, listened to Kritzinger, and he was, of course, very, very confident that students from Fort Hare can go to Cape Town and do the honors course, and he could give them support and make sure that they pass. So after the lecture, he said, "Are you ready to take my offer? You come to my department." I said, "How do I come to your department? I'm still owing data processing. I'm still owing cost accounting. And now you say that I'm going to do the final CTA course. How do you get me to a final CTA course?" It's not a problem. You'll do those over weekends, parallel to doing the full CTA course.
Wow.
Yeah,
And you did.
I did it. I did it. That's how my dilemma of I had almost given up, and then Kritzinger, I suddenly get this invitation, and my problem is solved. Then I get to Cape Town, other frustrations in Cape Town, but long and short of it, I passed the CTA and wrote the board exam the following year.
Yeah, amazing. And qualified as a first. It's interesting, at various points in your life, people are able to either sustain you or give you a way out, or more importantly, inspire you to keep going, which seems to be a theme.
No, I believe in that too. That young people, when you work hard, you have got very clarity on your goals, and you are prepared to make the sacrifices. Somehow, there are always people out there who get would take interest in you because of your positivity and give you support. It always happens. If you work hard, you are disciplined, you are goal-directed, and somehow there will be someone out there who, when he encounters you and he got touched by your discipline and your desire to succeed, and would certainly say, how can I help?
Sure.
So to me, that happened a number of times. That's how I got interested in accounting, because it was the head of accounting department that took an interest in me. And then, of course, this thing of Chris Singer visiting the University of Fort Hare and being invited to his lecture, then that opened the door. I'm a strong believer in that. If you're really serious about your goals and you work hard, somehow you will come across someone who will believe in you and open the door.
Oh, that's very
now the challenge is whether when that happens, you will seize the opportunity or not. But it's very rare when you are really talented and you desire something very deeply that somehow the door doesn't get open. It's very rare.
Well, that's an encouragement for me, I must say. To keep going.
Keep going.
As for all younger listeners. Now, I'm going to put forward a way that CAs are described. I know which of the two you lean towards, but they're either lauded or derided. So some people see accountants as master number manipulators, and then others, of course, see them as the beacon or the bastion of financial integrity and fiscal responsibility. I know that you're in the latter camp. Is that, to fast forward your career a little bit, is that why you wrote the book Enabler or Victim? To really show the importance of the accounting profession doing its job. Maybe you could give us just an overview of why you wanted to correct the beliefs in chartered accountancy as a result of sort of the news stories around KPMG, VBS, SARS scandal.
Yes. You know, on qualifying as a chartered accountant, I attracted a number of talented African youngsters to take an interest in accounting. They started following me. Some of them had potential to be great scientists. Some of them were going to go marketing. But when I qualified, they got inspired. They took an interest to follow me. Suddenly, I had to embrace the fact that these youngsters look to me in terms of inspiring them, creating opportunities and motivating them. So I tried to do that. Of course, I was a youngster myself. You know, I made mistakes like all young people when you are young. You are not as disciplined as you would. Sometimes it's just too many distractions. But somehow I managed to start a department of accounting at the University of Transkei, and also to establish my own accounting firm in Umtata. Took article clerk. Very talented people were much brighter than me. And even in those who were in my class, in accounting 1, 2, 3 that I taught, some of them I sensed that these guys are very talented. But they look to me. They are here because they believe in me. They want to look to me. So that did influence me too, because I just realized the responsibility.
So you were held up to expectations similar to what you described, wanting to live up to your parents, and now you've got this class, this following of students who believe in you.
Yes, yeah. So that's how it all started. And then, of course, being the first African chartered accountant, a number of opportunities opened to me, and I was given a leadership role quite early in my life. I mean, when I, for instance, as I say, teaching at the University of Transkei, starting the Department of Accounting there, it was after 3 years, I was promoted. I think within 5 years, I was head of department of accounting. And again, having responsibility, lot of responsibility that goes with that. Those things taught me to really take myself seriously in terms of being a role model to others, right? So, and also about the accounting profession itself. That is, a chartered accountant, I must perform with these high levels of integrity, levels of competence. That became quite something that is demanded of me, and I tried my best to measure with that. Yeah, with that background, come 1994, and the professional organization in South Africa had to admit black people. The South Institute of Chartered Accountants had to face that as well. And thinking of...
What was your relationship with them at the time?
No, there was no relationship.
Not even as a...
I was just a member, but
okay.
I was never in a committee or attending annual general meetings of theirs, no. Because I was going to be the only African there. And my views, nobody was interested in my views. So, and again, I was in the Transkei, that possibly makes even things worse.
More contentious.
More contentious. So, come 1994, I'm in Johannesburg, I'm in Cape Town. I live in Cape Town. And then the Southern Institute of Chartered Accountants realized that it had to respond. It can't remain white as it was now, because this is a democratic South Africa. Then they approached me around 1997 to join their council, governing body, and with a view that I became vice president the following year and became president in 1998 of the Southern Institute of Chartered Accountants. So I agreed to that. But again, being the only African there, it is, I realized the expectations in terms of being the role model and people looking to me to really to do the right thing. That was
set that standard for yourself.
So it made me think very deeply about the role of accounting and auditors in society. When I was president of SAICA, I had to represent SAICA, talk about the role of accounting and auditing in society, our role in making sure that the chief executives and chief financial officers who are entrusted by society to manage resources, capital that is entrusted to them to manage that in the best interest of those outside parties. I said this is a very important responsibility that you have as chartered accountants, because society looks at you. And then at the end of the year, if you're auditor, they say you as auditor, you must pronounce whether those entrusted by society to manage this on behalf of society have done that with integrity and are reporting faithfully. I said, this is your role. This is very, very important. So you have to uphold high standards of ethical conduct as well as competence to fulfill this role. So I started understanding this and developing this pride in my role as a chartered accountant and the role of accountants in society. So it was against that background, actually, that when the global financial crisis exploded in 2008, 2009, and the accounting profession in the United States in particular was under attack for failing to warn investors that the executives of financial institutions, especially banks, were taking excessive risks.
Or not even understanding the risks.
Not even understanding the risk. And that, society was relying on auditors to warn, to give a warning that, look, what you are observing now, this risk-taking is bordering on being irresponsible. So auditors were being then criticized for failing to fulfill their role, warn society and actually qualify accounts or refuse to, because of the excessive risk that had accumulated in the banks. So accountants received a lot of criticism for during that time. So again, on my side, I said, society is right. These economists, politicians, they are right in criticizing our profession. Instead of defending ourselves, with the usual excuse that were being deceived by chief executives, greedy chief executives or greedy chief financial officers. We should also say this thing was so pervasive. If we're really taking our role of protecting society against greedy chief executives, we should have blown the whistle. So we failed to blow this. So I started saying that openly in my public addresses that, look, we are not fulfilling society's expectations of us as a profession.
Which to you must have been really difficult to say, given
Yeah,
that
it was difficult.
Your life's
it was very difficult to say, because when you're a member of a profession, the tendency is to protect your members, to protect against attack from outside, criticism from outside. But when you say, we can do better, people feel uncomfortable with that. I started saying that. And then by the time that, the KPMG thing exploded, I was already making those remarks publicly, that as auditors we can do much better. We can protect society much more stringently by demonstrating more courage in confronting greedy chief executives or taking exception or refusing to express positive opinions on finance where we feel that there's dishonesty on the part of that. So the KPMG thing came at that time. That's why it was easy for me to accept that and say that, look, KPMG, one of the great big brands in the accounting profession, is perceived to be implicated in corruption. So for me, if they want me to get involved there, it can only be on the basis of me going out there to say any accountant or auditor who allows himself to be used in advancing corruption or bribery is acting against the best interests of this profession, and we must reject that person and must go to jail. They must, we must not protect them. So if we want to protect our profession, we must take our role to society more seriously. Yeah.
Oh, it would have been incredibly difficult to come to terms with the fact that you did find that. In some cases, you did find people that you needed to kick out. But on the other hand, the level of respect, the understanding that people had of what you were protecting must have also enhanced, and people could understand more of what you were trying to do, what you were saying even before that scandal. As you said, you were already making statements that it needed to happen. Have you found that there's been a shift after that? Has the perception changed at all, in your opinion?
Yeah, like all professions, the fear of being sued. When you as an auditor, you accept that you could have done better to detect fraud, for instance. If a company has been producing fraudulent, irregular financial statements to mislead the public, like Steno, for instance, for years. So for you now, as a member of the profession, to say, yes, sorry, we should have detected this, done better than this, it does not come easily, because in the United States, for instance, countries like that, you'll be sued. Your company people will come up and say, you are accepting liability, pay,
because you relied on the information.
Yeah.
Well, I relied on the information.
There was that kind of thing. So it was difficult, but because the criticism or incidents of companies failing because of defective audits had increased and become an embarrassment to the accounting professions, organizations, like the Southern Institute of Chartered Accountants, like there's the International Federation of Accountants as well, which is a global body. All those bodies now who are really have responsible for making sure that protecting the reputations and of the profession. They said, no, we must increase our demands on our members in terms of making sure that they uphold high standards of competence. So those professional bodies now started revising standards, saying that if you are doing an audit now, we want you to do much more detailed work. And now the auditing standard, for instance, now has got very detailed prescriptions regarding how you go about detecting the risk of fraud in a company. So what I'm saying then, the professions has responded.
And it's a positive response.
It's a positive response. Yeah. It's not just denial now. It's saying that society is right. They to expect our profession to do more to detect fraud. So now the standards are much more stringent. And also when it deals with the issues of conflict of interest, for instance, doing an audit and advisory to the same client, the regulations now, or the standards regulate that strictly now. Under what circumstances, you cannot do that. You cannot do an audit and to the same client and so on. So really there's been responsive, much as there was resistance at the beginning, but I'm pleased to say that the professional bodies, especially at the global level, has responded strongly and have actually made sure that the auditing profession is able to render much higher levels of confidence on the work they do.
I mean, what's so remarkable about that is not that you were the only bastion for it, but it's on the back of the opinions you gave, the lectures you were providing, the work and the input that you gave at KPMG, for example, that the globe has looked and said, actually, this is correct. We need to match the standard set here in South Africa from SAICA, which is tremendous. Now, let's pause on the accounting. I've read that you've said before, you've spoken of the new Partnership for African Development as the pinnacle of your career. That was when I think you were Secretary General.
Yeah.
And that was adopted into the AU, the African Union. What do you hope it will achieve? And now looking back on a career where you've had incredible peaks, is that still one of the pinnacles? Where is that going?
It was a great project. I was very grateful to be given that responsibility. Remember what I said earlier? My dream as a youngster was to become chief economist for Africa.
Yes.
Now it was a realization of that dream.
Amazing.
President Mbeki appointed me to become the Secretary General of Economic Development Program for Africa. That was what NEPAD was. So it was just having that responsibility. It was a great opportunity. I'm very grateful for it. We made significant progress in terms of challenging African governments, African presidents, to adopt much higher levels of governance, uphold high standards of governance in their own country, and protect human rights. And we had all kind of agreements signed at the African Union level in terms of really making sure that we bring to an end the issue of African presidents persecuting their own people because they politically disagree with them. We encourage multipartyism, deepening democracy. In addition to that, we encourage African countries to work together in connecting their countries with infrastructure. We said for Africa to develop, you need roads, telecommunication networks, railways connecting African countries so that you can broaden markets and make African economies much more viable, if they are more integrated. We made significant progress in all those areas, especially in the optic fiber installations that connect African countries and so on. But that was during the time that President Mbeki and in South Africa was president, and in Nigeria, President Obasanjo was president. There was good chemistry between the two of them. They led the continent to actually to embark on a transformative journey, on many things, calling on saying that any country where there is usurpation of power through a coup, unconstitutional means, they will not allow that. They will intervene and make sure that, all these military leaders who depose their governments will not be allowed to be members of the EU. So they took a very strong stand. But unfortunately, it lasted only for 5-6 years. When the two of them now left office, first it was Obasanjo and later President Mbeki, there was no proper succession planning. So leadership of NEPAD became weaker and the momentum declined and I left. So I'm afraid it was a good start, but it could not be sustained. And momentum in terms of renewal of the African continent, if you recall, during from about 2001 to possibly up to the time of the global financial crisis, African economies were growing by more than 4 or 5%, the continent. But then, because of the reforms, it was partly because of reforms, and also because of the favorable prices of commodities, global commodities. But without reforms, African countries would not have derived the real benefits from the better commodity prices. But reforms did help. But I'm afraid Africa has lost that momentum now. As you can see, there are many coups in West Africa, there's instability in the Congo, and so on and so on. It was a wonderful experience for me. I derived a lot of personal satisfaction, and I felt that I was doing the work with a real purpose. But it's a pity that it could not be sustained because Africa were not very good at ensuring leadership succession.
In the reading of history that I've done over that period of time, it does seem to have been quite a peak in the performance of the continent, as you say. I think the one positive I can sort of see from the work we're doing on the capital markets is that there seems to be a bit of a renaissance for the movement. The growth now doesn't just exist in Nigeria and South Africa, for example. A handful of the SADC countries are performing really well, growing well again. Infrastructure's come back, particularly connection to technology and payments is driving that forward. So to know that your work there has laid a blueprint and a framework that hopefully we've got leaders now able to pick up again. That would be the dream. That would be the hope. I thought I'd ask you one last question, if I may. And thank you so much for sharing. It's really been a wonderful journey. I've learned lots that I hadn't read before, so thank you. But what are some lessons that you would want to pass on? Not political, maybe not even career. You mentioned your family, you've got children. What are some of the changes you'd want to see in Africa in the next generation, the generation now that does need to succeed in leadership?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I hope I'm not evading the question. But for me, this question of why Africa is failing to take off has been a big concern of mine. I've been grappling with this thing, trying to really understand what is Africa lacking compared to other civilizations that were not part of the scientific and industrial revolution that really triggered the takeoff of Europe, America, and so on. The countries that were not part of that, but they managed, countries that were not part of that first wave of the industrialization, some countries that were not part of that managed to emerge and actually transform themselves. Japan first, and later the Asian tigers that we all talk about, but more recently China. It's really amazed everyone. In 30, 40 years, they've taken everyone out of poverty. I've been asking myself all the time, why are we not able to do this in Africa? The overarching answer I have to that, I know it's not easy to implement, but I cannot see, in my view, there's no shortcut. I think the thing that we should prioritize is what I call the scientific and technological and managerial upliftment of African people on an intentional and purposeful, manner. I don't think we have taken seriously the fact that the reason we are behind is not because we have less resources, we have less people in terms of youth and so on, and ambition. People are there, and the resources are there, the rivers are there, the oceans are there. What is lacking is that we have not really built the knowledge, the technological and capabilities of the people through intentionally. In other words, what countries like China and Japan, what they did, they transformed their education. Education became the main instrument for transforming from underdevelopment to development status. They transformed their education at ground level and also made sure that that education is integrated with technical skills, the use of science in actually solving problems. And then they introduced also in their rural areas the use of science to transform agriculture and so on, and transform the mindsets of the people, empower them with knowledge, empower them with technical skills, transform their mindsets by showing them that through education, through skills, they can acquire capabilities that they didn't have before and be able to transform their societies. We haven't grasped this, and our education is in my view, is about socialization. We think that our pupils must go to school so that they can read English and also be able to do the most elementary calculations and so on. We don't see education as the transformative instrument to equip people with mindsets, knowledge, and so on that enable them to take control of their lives and harness the scientific knowledge that's available in the rest of the world to transform their own situation. We're missing it even now. We still have education where majority of pupils at schools take maths literacy because we say maths is too difficult for them. All kinds of things that we do. And when we have unemployed youth, instead of linking instead of sending them to train them in carpentry, in electric, to become electricians, to become plumbers, and so on, we just give in 350 rands a month, and not deal with the root cause of the thing. The root of the cause is lack of capabilities to make a meaningful contribution in a modern economy. If you don't address that, so I may not be answering your question directly, but this is my most fundamental frustration, and that even now we're not addressing the real thing.
I mean, it's an incredible answer. Do you think that the difference here, if I could try to link it back to your story, you had expectations to live up to by telling pupils that they can take maths lit instead of challenging themselves to building their own vision? Is that the lack? Is that something that we're just not seeing?
Possibly we have no inspiration, we have no aspirations, we have no ambitions. We've set our goals very low. I mean, I did point out that getting out of prison and so on, I couldn't be at peace with myself because I was 2-3 years behind my age group. Getting free in South Africa and Africa in the 60s or in 1994, being behind the developed countries in everything, To me, that's how I would look at this thing. I would say, here I am. I'm possibly 3-4 decades behind the developed countries, or 50 years behind them. What is it that I must do in terms of closing that gap? How do you do it? If you understand, it's not a question of saying, oh, they've got bombs, I must go and buy bombs. I must use my gold to go and buy bombs. It's understand the ideas that enable them to develop the bombs or whatever they do. And equipping your people with those ideas is equipping your people with the ideas so that they can do this thing for themselves. It frustrates me to note, decimal point, that when you look, every time that I listen to manifestos by political parties, I'm waiting for one who's going to say, how do we build this knowledge, technical mindset, transforming mindset of our people? What is it that must do? People think that, you must deal with the consequences of this thing. People are unemployed, public works, and so on and so on and so on. And no one, actually, even now, no one is talking about transforming our education. No one, all these political parties, no one. They are going to talk about building a road and so on. The infrastructure that you need is human infrastructure. Your people must have the capacity to deliver themselves from poverty.
Prof, you've given us probably one of the most interesting roadmaps for human capital. And so thank you for sharing your story with us on the podcast. People can find out more. There's a biography that has been written. You've also released a book. And of course, you're available in many of the talks that you do for people to listen. Thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Shapers, Makers, Builders and Breakers. We trust that you've been encouraged by what you've just heard. Subscribe to future episodes and find out more about us at shaperspodcast.co.za. That is shaperspodcast.co.za.
Well, that's right. Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes and other content. And remember, share any feedback with us. We'd love to hear from you. Find me on Twitter at b_d_shaw or via email. We look forward to your company the next time on Shapers, Makers, Builders, and Breakers. Until that time, cheers, bye-bye.